So, if we're doing this chord progression, G major, A minor, B minor, I'm just looking in those notes really to try and find, more than anything, I'm looking for the half steps, for the ones that are right next to each other.
Yeah.
So when I do that, I can see a half step happening right here, right there, and then, so I have one of these middle fingerings. Cool?
Yeah.
And that could also be the top of a ring. It will be the top of a ring pattern.
Right.
So it's either the bottom of a middle pattern or the top of a ring pattern. So what you need to do to define the scale is figure out which one of those middles it is or which one of those rings is. Like, is your next middle here or is your next middle here? Right? Once you know that, you're good to go. So you can do that by ear. You can just take this. Once you see three notes on a string, you can kind of go, I know this one's either going to be middle or an oddball. So check to see if it's a middle. And if that note isn't right and you slide down and it's right, that way you can play and kind of feel, okay, this was a wrong note, slide out of it.
Right.
Cool? So if this one works, which it happens to, that works.
Yeah.
Cool?
Yeah.
And what that does then is tell you, okay, you're on the middles, you can go up to the rings, and remember you have to switch around the second string. You have to switch your pointer a fret up.
Right.
So when you're crossing between the second and the third string, the second string is always closer to you. So whether you're thinking about going up or down, you're always thinking about a shift that looks like that on the second string. So on here, I don't have to think, okay, when I shift up, when I'm going up, shift up, and when I'm going down, shift down. I'm always just thinking about keeping that second string one fret closer to me.
Closer to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
The third string shifted this way and the second's this way. So if I'm playing, get to the second string closer to me. My finger's closer on the second string.
Right.
Cool? And it's always two rings, two middles, and then at the oddball, when you're going from the middles to the oddball, that's where you shift closer to you. So here's the middles, I have to have that oddball one fret closer to me. There is not a shift when you go back to the rings. So when you do the rings, when you do the oddball going into the rings, there's no shift there. Cool?
Okay, yeah. So you shift when you go from the middle to your oddball, I guess?
Yeah, from the two middles to the
Is that
oddball,
always closer to you?
the oddball is always closer to you.
And also when you switch from the third to second string, the second string is
Closer to you.
closer to you.
Yes, that can counteract itself. That can counteract the issues. I mean, if I was like right there. So if I do this, I have my two middles. Normally, I'd be shifting here to get to the, to the next oddball.
Right.
But because it's on the third string, that string gets shifted one fret, so it makes up for it. The second string would be shifted up there, but because of the oddball, we have one fret closer. So you can just memorize it when you're here whenever you do that middle on the second string, the oddball is going to be at the same fret. Make sense? Normally,
It's on the second string.
so normally you'd be shifting up to get to the second string or down to get to the third string.
Right.
But so you'd be going like this, but because it's on the third string, it's getting shifted back. Does that make sense? They counteract each other there.
Yeah.
Normally when you go down to the third string, you shift down, but because we're on the oddball, we're shifting up. Does that make sense? There's always a shift up on the oddball
Right.
from the middles, and there's always a shift down on the third string when you're going in this direction.
So when you're going, is it down the scale when you go like up the string?
Yeah, you're going down in pitch when you go up physically on the guitar.
So when you're going down, okay, so that's why the second string is always close to you. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so you would, normally you'd shift down a fret here, right?
Right.
But the oddball shifts up, so it ends up being on the same fret.
Right. Okay.
That's the only place where those two rules collide.
Okay.
Cool?
Yeah.
And so then I've got the oddball that going in this direction. When you're going to the ring fingers, there's no shift. It just stays in the same place. Cool?
Yeah.
So you can always check that you're doing everything right by making sure that you end up on the exact same thing on the sixth string. If the sixth string isn't the same as the first, you got it wrong somewhere. Because look, two middles, oddball, two rings, two middles, and I'm doing the same thing that I did there. Cool?
Right.
Make sense?
Okay.
Now look at this. This is really a big thing to get with the rotating pattern, the major scale pattern. When you're doing this, you can see that I've got those two half steps right there, right?
Yeah.
That's 1 and 7 and 3 and 4. Those are the numbers in the scale. So whenever you have notes together, they can either be the top of a ring or the bottom of a middle. Make sense? That's the only way you'll ever see those notes together, is two strings like this or two strings like this. So you can use that as a transition. So if I'm playing here, I can go up and I know that's where I am, and then I can use that. Now right here, you're always going to have on the 6 strings the entire pattern plus an extra string. It's going to start over.
So is that the same scale then? Or?
Same scale notes, yeah. In fact, watch. I can go. Get the idea? It's the same notes.
Yeah.
It just has one note higher. So there's two ways to kind of get out of the position you're in. One is to always know that whenever you do this pattern, in every scale, or in every string in the scale, you can go up 2 frets. You can go.
Oh, is that why going up 2 frets works then?
You can always go up 2 frets in every place that you see the scale, no matter where you are. But what that starts to do is sometimes is get you out of the pattern. Here, it happened to get us into another version of the pattern where you're playing middles, right? Because if you play this, you got these notes. You know you can always go up 2, right?
Yeah.
So now if you look at that, that's a middle pattern right there. Make sense?
Right.
So that can help you just shift. And without having to think much, without having to think about where you are in the pattern, you can just play the scale all the way through, and you're going to get all of these notes that you can use that to like tap or whatever, you know? And see wherever I'm here, like if I'm doing this, make sense?
Yeah.
I can play all those notes. Cool.
The 2 frets above.
Yeah, or here, and I can go 2 frets down also. So I can go like this. Or like this.
That's
Cool.
Yeah.
Or here I had, and now you see what's happening there when I go down? I added this extra note, right? So I tried to get these 2 extra notes right here. I played this. Now I'm playing what I had before with a tap, right? But I know I can get these 2 notes down here. So do you see what's happening in that transition? Wherever the middles are, it transitions to rings. So there are a couple ways to find your way around the scale, because if I'm here, I know I can go up to here, right? And then continue the pattern there. Now when I continue the pattern there, I got 2 rings here, I can shift up there. 2 middles and then 2 rings. Here's my 2 rings, and again with a shift on the 2nd string.
So you can just work your way all the way up.
All the way up, yeah. So now here's 2 rings. Now I can do that 2 middles. And you notice that, you can't see what I'm thinking, but I'm relying on this fundamental understanding about how the notes move, to move my fingers. I'm not thinking about note names.
Right, yeah.
My fingers just know that if I'm doing 2 rings, it's an oddball, and I shift as necessary. You know, I've got those couple rules so internalized that when I go to the oddball, my hand automatically moves up after I've done some middles, and then it goes back to the rings, and it goes back to the middles and the oddball, and it just keeps on doing that pattern, that little circular rotating pattern.
Could you run through could you go slowly through 1 and then shift?
Sure.
And do it
Okay.
again and then shift again.
So
Maybe, 3 shifts or something.
Yeah, sure. So what we did here was we did these chords, and I found a little half step. I'm looking to find this scale. My dead giveaway is to look for half steps. I'm looking for things that are right next to each other. As soon as I find a half step, I know I have one of the strings figured out.
Right.
I just have to get the next one. I can just do that by ear, or I can look at the chords. I tend to look at the chords, if that chord that we played here is here, so I know I have these notes. Bam, I got the scale, and there it is. So I'm just looking for it. But you can even do this without even having any sense of what key you're playing in. You can just listen to somebody playing something. You can sit down and pick some songs, like play a chord progression. You go like this. I don't have any idea of what I want to do. Okay, so I'm just listening to that. All you need to do is listen to that and go somewhere. And I can feel I got some notes there. Okay, so now look, I'm looking for half steps. I'm not finding half steps. So there's a half step. So now I'm going for that. Now I know the next thing after a ring is either going to be another ring, right?
Yeah.
Or it's going to be an oddball. So it sounds to me, I sounded that out really quickly. By starting somewhere, finding a note that sounded like it was. Now, obviously, I could have found that just by looking at those chords. Aha, I got that, so I can kind of look for it and see. And if I'm playing the chords like this, I know I got this note here, so I'm kind of there. I got the scale. Just by a really quick glance at the notes that are in the chords, I can start to just figure out where the scale is. Now, here, so that was a B flat minor and an E flat 7. So I started to find out that those two strings were positioned like that. And there's not a lot of options. It's either going to be two rings and two middles or an oddball, right? That's all you got. That's what you're looking for. That's the whole point of learning this, is that it makes it really easy to figure out what notes to play.
Right.
You know? So as soon as I got those two rings, on the third string I got to shift down. You know, when I'm going between here and here, the second string's closer. So
Second
whenever I
string closer, okay.
yeah. Or you could say the third string's lower when you're going down. So two rings, then it's going to be two middles. Then you jump back up for the oddball. See, I jumped up a fret.
Okay, yeah.
And I got goes back to the rings. And you can always check that you're doing it right because you ended in the right place on the sixth string compared to the first string. I had this here.
It's like a mirror image of
Yeah, the first string and the sixth string are the same notes.
frets and everything.
Yeah, it should always be the same because those are both E strings.
Perfect.
I also do a funny little thing here where I almost always, when I'm doing patterns, I'll fill this in with chromatic. So I have three notes on that string. So I go,
Yeah, it
just-
sounds weird.
yeah, it keeps the consistency of a three note per string pattern happening. You could also fill it in with, remember, you can use two frets above or two frets below. So if you really want to stay just in the scale, you can do this and you get the idea. Or I can go, you get the idea. I'm thinking about the oddball and adding one more note. I usually just put a chromatic in. Keeps it nice, tight fingering. And it sounds kind of cool to a lot of times. Cool?
Yeah, so you started with the ring at the bottom, but you could have done, what, you could have shifted two frets up and then started with the middle there?
Okay, so whenever you have the rings, the first rule to learn is really simple. Whenever you're playing this pattern anywhere, as soon as you found a scale, on a, you know, all the way through, you can take any of those strings and move up two frets from your highest note, and you've got another note in the scale. Or you can go two frets down. And it's always going to be a note in the scale, always.
Right.
Super simple way. Then you've got actually not just a whole position, but you've got three positions. You've got this one. And what that does is, if you look at this, we're looking at those half steps. That's what really is the dead giveaway from where to find these things.
Right,
Because it's always going to be either, you can use them as the top of the ring finger pattern, or you can use them as the bottom of the middle finger pattern. So that's a shifting point. So when you're doing this, you're always going to have the full pattern plus an extra string, because the pattern's only 5 strings. 2 rings, 2 middles, oddball, and then it starts over. So the
Right.
6th string is always going to be the same as the first string. Cool?
Yeah.
So I got this now. I can do this. If I go the other way, watch what happens. That's not one of the fingerings we know. That actually leads to another fingering pattern, another way. There's an extended version of this,
Okay.
but don't worry about it now. You don't need it because you're going to get everything you need from this. But right here, that's not in the pattern, right?
Right.
So if I want to shift there, I can't really use that. It's gotten me out of this 2 rotating patterns when you go up and down. So what I'm doing is looking for my next pattern, right? My next 2 middles. My next.
Oh, I see.
So once I get down the string, I can go and I can take that and shift my hand into it. Now there, I've got another middle. I can shift out of that. Make sense? Cool, makes sense. Now here I'm here, I want to go up, I can just go like that. Then when I'm here, I can go like that. Then when I'm here, I can go like this. Now here I got to look for, here's another one right here, I can go up like that. I'm literally relying on my habitual habit of putting my fingers in this. When I play those, like I'm literally, like consciously I can't think that fast. Like when I'm playing those scales, I cannot think that fast. And I'm not thinking about notes. There I have no idea what key I'm in by the way I'm thinking.
Right.
I could get all those notes by thinking, okay, what key am I in and where are those notes? Or I could, be thinking about some other, fingering pattern for playing the major scale. But because my fingers are so used to just always doing this, where I was like that, and they always work like that, 2 middles, 2 rings, that makes it super quick, super quick. And it's more than that. It's that you really start to get used to like what each of those notes kind of sounds like. And you start to really develop, like when you play melodies in this and you really develop your melodic ability, I can jump around the scale. Like if I'm looking at this, it's really easy for me to do things like pedals. Or motives. because my fingers are so used to working within that structure of two middles, two rings.
Right.
And when I'm jumping, I can jump more easily. Where am I here? So I can jump. Or sequences. I'm not doing that from, my hands are just used to doing that in that pattern,
Yeah.
It's because I'm used to doing the sequences like that. I've practiced sequences there. I've practiced pedal tones. And I've practiced doing I know how they're going to work on every string. Over the years, you just get really good at navigating that simple rotating pattern.
Right.
It gets better and better and faster and more understandable about what's going to sound like when you start playing. Those two rings always sound like that, whatever key you're in. They always have that melodic similarity wherever you're doing it. I go down here, so I go. It's the same octave. Get the idea? So you see how I shifted, right? I went from here and then went to here. All right. So sounds there. If I go here, where am I here? So I go up here. I use that little ring and pinky thing to jump up to middles. Now that's the same notes. Get the idea? Like whenever I do that fingering pattern, it's going to sound the same. It's going to be the same notes. Or if I go up here, remember the shift on the second string? So there, that's the same melody again. You get the idea? You hear it's the same melody all along. Wherever I do it. Cool, wherever I do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The more you learn that pattern, the better you're going to understand the way melodies happen on the fretboard. And the way that the notes that are possible in any chord progression fit on the fretboard. And the more you can look to see that pattern in the scale, not just looking at the notes, not just going, okay, I got to do this. I was doing this chord progression a second ago. Not just going, okay, so I'm playing that chord and I can do it like this, or I can do it like this. And so I can find, some notes that are in there, or like if I do this, I get sort of a kind of an uncomfortable way of doing the scale with some extra notes.
Yeah.
That's what we get, if we do it that way. It's not even a total major scale there because if there weren't enough notes, I would have needed another one of the G chords up here to finish it, right? So there's nothing habitual about playing it that way. Like I have to really look and think about every note in the chord, which is fine. You can do a lot. You can go. See, actually there, I just cheated and I got this note because I know I can get that note because I know the fingering.
So you just want to use the chord notes to find your first scale base, but then you're off and going.
Two strings, and you're off, and you know where you're going, and you can get the entire rest of the fretboard. And even before you start really finding your way by doing this and going, okay, now I'm here, now I gotta find these, and I'm here, and I'm here, and I'm here. Now I gotta find those two rings, and I can do that at the middles here, Now I'm here, I know I can do that. Now here's my two rings again, so I can jump up there. You following that? Have you seen what I'm doing? So I played this scale. Right here I got two rings, right? So I can jump up there. And now I got another scale. Make sense? Right? So I can do all that, and that's going to give me all the notes that I can play against that chord progression. All of them. And I can just jump them. It turns out there's only 5 of these. There's only 5 fingerings you'll ever see. There's this one with the 2 rings on top. There's this one with 2 middles on top. Then there's this one.
That one you just did right there.
Yeah.
Did you shift it all? It looks like you just went.
No, because that was the one place where both shifts cancel each other out. Whenever you do the 2 middles on top, you would shift down there, but because you're going oddball, you shift up, so it keeps it the same fret. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
There would be a shift here because of the 3rd string, because the 2nd string is always closer, right?
Because it's the oddball.
But because of the oddball, whenever you go to the oddball from the middles, you'd shift up. So normally, you'd do this, you'd jump here, but because it's on the 3rd string, it moves back down. Cool?
Okay,
Those 2 rules count themselves. So yeah, there's no shifting. Whenever you do, so that's one of the 5. There's only 5, but I'll give you the diagrams. But
Yeah,
I think
that would be great.
what's more important, and you definitely eventually just want to kind of memorize all the scales. I mean, the 5 ways to find this. So is this one? 2 rings, 2 middles, oddball, and then there's 2 middles, oddball, 2 rings, and 2 middles. Then there's this one where you have the oddball, 2 rings that shift. So 2 rings that shift, and then 2 middles, and back to an oddball.
Do they overlap each other at all, or no?
Yeah. Well, they always overlap at those half steps. So this one, see there's the 2 middles, that's those two middles are the two rings here.
Right.
So yeah, that's how you shift. Then these two rings right here are the two middles here. So I got now two middles here, oddball, two rings on the bottom. Now I got those two rings, I can go up. And there's two middles, two rings, oddball, shifting up on the second string, and then shifting back, And then that's it, that's all. So if you learn, there's only 5 positions that you can actually ever see on the fretboard using this rotating pattern.
Right.
But I think it's much more important to actually get the pattern from the inside, to kind of develop it string by string when you're playing, so that you can learn for your fingers to predict naturally, where they're going, and just to understand where the next notes are going to be.
Right.
Remember, there's never any chord progression that's going to not be based on the scale. So at the basis of every chord progression you ever see, you're going to see the scale.
Yeah.
One issue you can rise into is that the scales, very often there are more than one scale that the chords are drawn from in a chord progression. So you have to switch scales. Instead of be playing on one scale and all of a sudden it's not working anymore when you go to a certain part of the progression. It means you have to look at the scales that are in that part of the progression and change the scale appropriately when the scale stops working. Make sense?
Yeah.
And there are other things that happen, like when you have seventh chords, it's actually possible to potentially be in 2 keys at the same time. Like when you're doing a blues, you're actually in several different major scale keys. You're using notes from several different major scale keys. It's just a whole jumble of notes. So you can actually switch modes for each chord of the blues progression. And I think that's one of the reasons why people don't use major scales, because they can't get one scale to work for the whole progression. And so it seems you can use a Dorian scale over the main chord. That's just a certain position of playing this. You can find a fingering that will work for the whole blues.
Right.
It'll work fine. In fact, you can find 2 of them. There's Dorian and Mixolydian that work. None of that has to mean anything. You don't have to know any of those names. It just means that whatever you're playing, you're always going to see this: 2 rings, 2 middles, 2 rings, 2 middles. Cool?
Yeah. I'm just worried I'll mess up the shifting of the oddballs and the second and third string.
There's only 2 ways that you can do it. When you're going to this between the second and third string, the second string is going to be closer to you. So when you're going up to the second string, you shift up. When you're going down to the third string, you shift down. And then the other place is when you're going from the middles to the oddball shifts closer to you. So if you're on the oddball, you're going to shift down a fret to continue the pattern. Cool?
Right.
If you're on the middles, you're going to shift up a fret to continue the pattern. Cool?
Okay.
Make sense? The oddball's closer to you.
The oddball's just the one with just the 2 notes, right?
Yeah, 2 fingers. Is that cool? 2 rings, 2 middles. So 2 rings, 2 middles, and then oddball, those 2 fingers.
And that's always closer to me. And then if it's on the third string, it'll just be
if you're switching between the second and third string, that's what you have to. When you're going down to the third string or up to the second string has to be closer to you. So when you're going down to the third string from the second string, you're going to shift down a fret. When you're going up to the second string from the third string, you're going to shift up a fret. Cool? Second string is always closer to you.
Okay.
Make sense?
I think I got it. Yeah.
And you always have. This is the super, super valuable part of this, is without having to think, you can go. And very often that's going to lead to another pattern that you can play. If it doesn't, like when I shift down here, that's not another pattern, right? Then what I really need to do is keep this and look for the next place the pattern go. Now if I want to shift there, I can go. So that's the rings, and I can go down to the middles.
Right. Okay.
Makes sense? And there, I can take that. Cool?
Yeah.
Again.
So could you just run through a couple of those scales for that chord?
Yeah, I just did that a second ago. That was on the video. So if we did this, so we take this one.
Yeah.
There's the middles, there's the oddball, and there's the rings. So it's 8-7-5, 8-7-5, 7-5-4, 7-5-4, 7-5, and then 8-7-5. You can slow that down.
Yeah.
Okay, now right there, I can either shift up 2 frets on either of these strings, which gives me another middle, or I can just think, okay, I have 2 rings, that turns into 2 middles.
Right.
Cool? Now, as soon as I have 2 middles, that was 10-8-7, 10-8-7. The next thing is going to be an oddball.
The oddball. Okay.
Now remember, oddball you normally shift up or on the third string, so it shifts back down. So when you do this here, it stays at the same fret. And then whenever you're going from the oddball to the rings, it's the same fret. So there's 2 rings, oddball, 2 rings, and then 2 middles again. And this is the same as the first string. I can check that that's right.
Gotcha.
Okay, now there again, I can go up 2 frets, but look what happens. I don't no longer, if I do this here, I no longer have something that's in our pattern. So to shift up from here, I can just use that and I can play that. Right?
Right, yeah.
Or I can look for where I have my 2 rings, and that's going to give me the pattern because those rings always turn into middles. So there's my 2 middles. Here I was doing 10, 8, 7, 10, 8, 7, 9, 7, 10, 9, 7, 10, 9, 7. So there, those 10, 9, 7s can go to 9, 10, and 12s.
So always look for the
Half steps.
the rings will become
Middles.
the middles, but
Yeah.
the middles will not become rings.
Middles become rings, you just move them down. So you move, like if you're in rings, you can move up to middles. Or if you're middles, you can move down to rings.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you can only move up from rings to middles, and you can only move down from middles to rings. 'Cause that's how they lay out, you know.
Perfect. Okay.
So you have this. Now I have rings. So here's my 2 middles. That's at 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12. On the 3rd string, I can go 9, 11, 12. And then I have to shift up to the 2nd string. So 10, 12, 13, and then an oddball. That's 10, 12. And then there.
That oddball moves back down there.
Yep, right there. Or jump back down. So I'm moving up a fret. And that's the same as the 1st string, so I know it's right. Cool?
Yeah.
Now, here, I can either move down right here, because I have that little shift between the
Right,
middles
yeah.
and the rings, or I can wait. You always have 2 middles and 2 rings, so you can shift down on the middles, or you can shift up on the rings. So here's my 2 middles. To get up, I can look at this, and that, the 9, 11, 12, 10, 12, 13 becomes 11, 12, 14, 12, 12, 13, 15. That's my 2 middles. So I shifted from this to that. The rings, the 2 rings, you see those 2 half steps right there? Become middles. And whenever you're doing middles, the next thing up is always a whole step away. It's always a pinky. And then after the middles, I got rings. And now here, I have an oddball. So you see I jump down because of the 3rd string, and then I jump back up because of the oddball. And then I've got 2 rings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, now I jump up. I can jump up from those rings to the middles. And I got 2 middles, 2 rings, oddball, jump back down because of the switch from the oddball. Because remember, the oddball has to be closer to you. So when I jump out of the oddball this way, I gotta do that. Is that cool?
Yeah.
I'm literally not thinking about notes. I'm just following that pattern, following those rules. Now right here, at any point, I can always go up 2 frets, and that's going to put me into another pattern there. If I do it here, I'm not going to get one of those patterns. I have this stretch. So if I do it here again, I don't get a pattern. But I'm looking for those places where I have rings and I can jump up. There's my 2 middles, which is 16, 17, 19, 16, 17, 19. And that gives me 17, 19, 20, 17, 19, 20 up here. Now I'm back in the pattern again. Cool?
Perfect. Yeah.
So that's the whole thing. I want a pole octave, you know?
Yeah.
And you can go the other way. Here, I'd go down here. So I have 8, 7, 5, 8, 7, 5, 7, 5, 4, 7, 5, 4. So on that middle, I can shift down. That would be 5, 4, 2, 5, 4, 2, and then 5, 3, 2, 5, 3, 2 to follow the middles.
And you said there's 5 possible patterns.
Yeah.
So every
Yeah.
time you move up, is that like
One of the
possible?
patterns, yep.
Okay.
There's only 5 of them. You'll get used to those patterns. If you're
Okay.
practicing this, you'll start to recognize, okay, I'm in this one.
Yeah.
And then you'll remember that comes to this one. Yeah, the whole idea is eventually just have the whole pattern learned. But
Right.
I think it's really, really fundamentally important to kind of understand like those rules about how the notes move from fret to fret, because that's how the fretboard is set up. You know, that's how our melodic system is set up on the guitar.
Right.
And have the basic idea of like whenever you're doing rings, because a lot of times when you're playing, you won't like necessarily think about the position you're in. You'll just kind of see notes that are next to each other. And that's what we're trying to capitalize here. Whenever you see notes next to each other, you're at one of those places where it's either rings or middles. And you can find that very quickly at that point. You know, just by playing. You know,
Yeah.
if I'm doing this again, like I said, you can take any chord. See, I'm doing that. I want to play over that. I'm just hearing that. I don't know what the chords are. I don't have to spend the time to think about what key that's in, let alone figure out what the chords are for a progression. All I need to do when I'm hearing something is kind of find. There we go. There, that kind of sounds like it's okay. I'm trying to find 3 notes on a string. I'm trying to find 2 notes next to each other. Here. Now I know the next. The next thing here is either going to be another ring. Ah, there it is. I got it. Now I know the rest of the scale. Cool? And I can just flail away, you know?
Right.
And do anything that I know. And the sense that you get from what you can do in those and what you practice, you're always practicing something within those patterns, always. If you're playing a melodic thing, pentatonic scales are contained in there. In fact, 3 pentatonic scales are contained in every one of these. The way pentatonic scales work, like you're here, I can take out those notes and go, get the idea? Like I take out the notes that are half like next to each other. You get that? Like if I take out these rings, I can also take out those middles, the pointers in them. The ones that are right next to each other, right? The 3 and the 7 in the 1, 7, 3, 4. I can take out. So this is 1, 7, 6. No, what am I doing? Sorry. This is 1, 7, 6, and this is 3, 4, 2. 3, 4, 2, 1, 7, 6. So I can take out these ones, the ring finger notes, right?
Yeah.
That are right next to the pinky notes. I can take out the 3 and the 7 and have it. So I take out the same numbers here, take out those, and I got a pentatonic scale. Cool?
Yeah.
All the pentatonic. And if I do it the other way, like if I take out this one, take out the 1 and the 4, then I got, I got that, then I got this. That's another pentatonic scale. That's just another position. I can do that every single time. I can take out one or the other. Neat?
Yeah.
That's a really, really special thing to get about how these work. And so then it's not a mystery at all about what you do with your major scales or with your pentatonic scales to add notes. It's just going to be, you can, when you play your major scales like you're doing this, you can either add 2 of these and you can scale, or you can add like these. As soon as you get 2 strings of it, bam, you know the rest of the scale.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does.
Or you could do this. Those are another possible. That's another mode that you could possibly add to the pentatonics by going 2 middles. Then I know what I'm doing next. Right? Make sense?
Yeah.
And I just stayed in that mode just by following the rotating pattern. Okay, that was a lot learning without a lot of playing, but we should do
I'll
this.
be able to follow that, I think.
Okay,
How long is it?
it's 32 minutes.